Hi, hello everybody. So finally, I found some time to actually do a recording on what I think about this book. I just finished this actually around 1 week ago, but I have not actually found the time to actually talk about it and and record a video about it. But it's finally the weekend. It's actually evening now, so that explains the rather inferior lighting of this video again. And but yeah, I actually have not really invested much in terms of producing anything. I finally got the time. I've been doing some errands during the day. I actually did some laundry, but I actually did the laundry a bit late because I had something up in the morning. So as you can see in the back there, I actually have my um, blankets still hanging because they aren't really completely dry. So I'm just gonna use my second blanket. I have a few blankets, so yeah. But anyway, I think it's really nice to actually finally found the time to talk about this book, The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. For me, this book is a pretty simple read. It is only about 300 plus. Actually, it's less than 300 pages long. It's about middle sized for me. I wouldn't consider it as really small, but I actually managed to finish it within 1 week with some days in between in which I didn't even actually read it because, I didn't have much time on those days. Overall, I do think that it's a rather lovely book. It's, uh, it's a fun read. It's a really nice book that talks about how it feels to be kind of conflicted about being at a different culture. So basically, in this book, our beloved protagonist's name is Gogol, and that's basically what the book is about. It's about his name and how his name is kind of like really different from the culture that he comes from and the culture that he is in currently in the story. His parents are Bengali from India, and his parents moved to America. And so, as a child, well, he basically is born in the US. So, as a child, he grew up in the US and grew up in an environment of American culture. And at the same time, it's kind of interesting that his name is not exactly Bengali nor American. His name is actually Russian because his father loves Nikolai Gogol so much. And there's actually some event that happens in his father's life that makes makes their parents to decide that Gogol would be this dude's name. And considering that that name is a pretty weird choice for a name, basically Gogol, our protagonist, pretty much doesn't really feel much comfort in actually growing up, with that name, because Gogol isn't, and like I said, Gogol isn't exactly a Bengali name or an American name, and even when you consider the fact that it comes from the Russian culture, it's not exactly a Russian first name as well. So it's not technically Russian as well. So basically, his name is kind of like something that is really, really out of place. You can't really put it in place somewhere. And when it comes to what is conventional for each of the cultures that is related to Gogol, our protagonist, he just finds it kind of difficult to actually pinpoint like how his name actually kind of he kind of struggles to find an identity that relates himself and his name and his surrounding cultures. And at the same time, apart from his name, the fact that he grows up in an environment with really conflicting cultures, conflicting practices, I think a lot of people would be able to relate to that. So I do think that the premise of this novel is really, really lovely. I think a lot of people will enjoy reading that because it speaks to a lot of people. It definitely speaks to me. That being said, at the same time, I do find in this book that I feel somewhat disconnected from the protagonist. Even though I like the fact that, the book is telling the story about how the protagonist is kind of like struggling with his identity and all that, I don't really connect well with him. It feels like the protagonist is kind of holding back something from me as a reader, and I don't feel like I'm really, up close and personal with the protagonist. I'm not sure if I'm really familiar with Gogol as a person. It feels like there is some sort of a wall between me and Gogol, even though I'm the reader and I'm supposed to be like really getting into his his inner emotions and all that. I don't know, for some reason I just feel like I don't feel enough from Gogol. Personally though, I feel much more from Gogol's mother Ashima, even though she's kind of a side character, but I feel like the descriptions of her emotions are actually a little bit more vivid compared to Gogol's. That kind of makes me appreciate Ashima's growth in this novel, Gogol's mother's growth in this novel, as compared to Gogol himself, even though Gogol is actually the main character in this novel. So because of that, I do find this book a bit average to my taste. I wish that I can learn more about Gogol. The book also mentions a lot about Gogol's relationship with a few of his girlfriends. While I do find the story overall to be interesting, I am not entirely emotionally invested with his relationships as well. It feels like the girlfriends just come and go, and I don't feel like the girlfriends, his relationships really leave some emotional punches this novel. So overall, I would say that because of that distance that I feel between me and the protagonist, I believe that it can actually give tons of emotional punch, but I'm just not really feeling it. But who knows, maybe if I read this book again, reread it for the second time, maybe I can feel more of that emotional punch. But first time reading it, I'm just not really feeling it. Therefore, from my first time reading of this novel, I would rate it a 3 out of 5 stars. Even though I gave it only 3 out of 5 stars, I do recommend it to everyone else who has not read this book, because I do think that this book really speaks to a lot of people, or pretty much when you want to read books about identity and family, and or just about foreign culture, it's a nice little read, and I think it is also very beautifully written, so I think it's worth checking out. So I guess that's it for my thoughts on The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. Anyway, the next book that I'm going to talk about is going to be slightly different. From America, we're going to move to China, and it is going to be The Last Quarter of the Moon by Qi Zijian, and I am actually about to finish this book. I read this book right after I finished The Namesake, and so far I really enjoy it. At the same time, I'm also reading the books that my sister bought for me, which I talked about in the last video. Alan Tishmarsh, The Haunting, and Alexander McCall Smith, Blue Shoes and Happiness. I definitely hope that I can find time to finish reading them. My schedule has been a little bit more hectic these days. I do hope more that I will be able to find time to actually record videos on those things and actually edit the videos. Usually editing takes more time. I guess things are gonna work out fine, probably, hopefully. So yeah, see you all next time. Bye bye.